Meet the Funder Week comes under the Springboard project, which is funded by UKA Direct through something called the SCCF, which is the Charities Challenge Fund program. This was a digital development grant that we had, and also the week is also supported by Welsh Government Wales for Africa. So welcome everybody. Just to give you a really quick heads up, this session is being recorded. So if you are not comfortable being on the recording, you can turn your camera off when you speak, and then your voice will come through, but not your image, not your video. We also ask, there's not a huge number of us, but it does help if we keep ourselves on mute, just in case there's some background noise that kind of disrupts the speaker speaking. But obviously, if you have something to say, then you can take yourself off mute. This is a really informal session. I think you know us, and we know most of you. But if you would like to say anything, there's reactions at your bottom of your screen. There's reactions, and if you click on that, then you can put your hand up. You can raise hand, and then we know you'll jump to the front of our image, so we know that you're keen to chat. It looks like that. If you can see now, I've got a little hands up symbol, and you can lower your hand when you're finished. Or you can put any questions you have for Julian into the chat. We encourage you to participate, but we know that not everybody is comfortable doing so, so don't feel that you absolutely have to. And please know that this is a safe space for minoritized people. So no form of abuse will be tolerated. We encourage challenging, constructive conversations. We encourage you to ask questions if you don't understand. And we encourage you to say if something is offensive, and we hope to have open conversations about these issues, but it is a safe space. So any form of abuse, you will just be removed, and we'll talk to you about it afterwards. There was one last thing. Oh yes, please. There's going to be a poll at the end, and you'll get an email at the end of this week asking how you've experienced working with us. So please do fill both in. It really helps us. All right. This is the timetable. We're starting now. Julian is going to speak about the grant, and then I don't even know if it'll take you 25 minutes, will it, Julian? Maybe. But there'll be a chance for you to ask questions afterwards. But as we said, we're informal, so feel free to raise your hand if you have anything pressing that can't wait until the audience question time. All right, lovely. Thank you very much.
Brilliant.
Over to you, Julian.
Thank you, Kath. So yes, when Kath says informal, it means that I haven't prepared any exciting slides or anything very glamorous. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of background to the grant that's available. I'll talk you through some of the criteria, and then I'll share my screen, and I'll just take us through the application form that we're asking people to fill in, and say a few words about each of those sections. I should start off by saying that all of this information is online. We will share, or have shared, a link to the page on our website, which gives you the application form and the criteria, and some more FAQs to help you through the process of filling in the form. So as a little bit of background, a couple of years ago, the Waterloo Foundation funded Hub Cymru Africa to do some research into the use of digital tools by the Wales Africa community to see what was going well, what wasn't going well, and the things that people really needed support with. And so we did that piece of work and handed it in, and used it as a basis for a further application for some more money to implement some of the findings and recommendations. And the recommendations were many and varied, but they included things like the community in Wales could do with some basic support in how to use digital tools, so some training and some guidance, and some networking. Somebody's coughing. If they could go on mute, that would be lovely. Thank you. And also what we could do with is some small grants, particularly to support smaller organisations who don't have a great deal of resources, in order that they can make better use of digital tools. And so when we talk about digital tools, we're talking about anything that is computer related. So it can be use of computers, use of mobile phones. It can be about using or developing apps. to support project work. It can be just about getting a license for a program to use to support your work. It could be about making better use of digital communications. So there's various things that are included in this. But what we are doing today is launching a small grants program. The grants are pretty small. We're talking about grants between £500 and £1,000 to make better use of digital tools. So I'll talk you through some of the key elements. That these grants are intended to assist organisations in Wales who support partners in Africa. And those partners have to be delivering project work, which is about achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And these grants are to support those partners and your organisations to make better use of digital technology in doing that. The grants are not intended to be project grants, which have their own development outcomes. We understand that for £500, £1,000, that we're not expecting you to run a project which helps to train people to do things that are going to support their livelihoods. We're not looking for health outcomes. We're not looking for development outcomes at all. So this is really about how to support your partner organisations and your partnership. Funding can be used for new hardware, so computers or phones, or even renewable energy technologies. Could be used for software, can be used for licenses, can be used for training and skills development. We can make some allowances also for people to spend on data, if that's an important part of delivering what they're doing. Can be about online communications or any other digital tools which will support your partner's work or your partnership. If you've got any doubts about the things that you'd like funding for, then please do come and have a chat with me about that. Anybody can email advice@hubcymruafrica.org.uk to set up a Zoom meeting or a telephone call to go through it. And finally, in those key elements, the grants are particularly designed to make a difference to the work of your partner and your partnership. And for that reason, it's unlikely that we will want to support organisations that are very well funded. We feel that a grant of £500 to £1,000 to an organisation that had lots and lots of money would not make a great difference to their work. And this is very much designed to support those organisations that particularly need it. So the criteria for the grants are that the lead applicants must be based in Wales. The organisation that's making the application has to be based in Wales, but it must have a partner organisation based in Africa, which would be supported by the grant. Applications can be for anywhere between £500 and £1,000. Applicants have to demonstrate value for money in their activities. So we will want to be clear that you're not just going for the most flashy and expensive thing available, that actually you're considering careful use of that money. Applications are subject to a conflict of interest declaration. So I couldn't apply, for example, and people who are working on judging the grants can't apply. So if you've got any doubts about that, then please do get in touch and ask me about that as well. And applications have to demonstrate that they've taken into consideration ethical and fair trade criteria when making purchasing decisions. Although we understand that that can be difficult, particularly when looking at digital technology. But there are some ways of doing it. And funds have to be spent by the 31st of December 2022. And that is to allow us to make sure that we've got everything sorted, and that we can evaluate the success of the work, and we can do a report for the Waterloo Foundation by the end of the project period. So what I will do now, hopefully, is share my screen just to take you through some of the application form, look over some of the questions that are there, and give a little bit of commentary on them in the hope that that will help you to fill them in. So if I can. Brilliant. Am I screen sharing successfully?
You are, yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Right. So the the structure of the form is probably quite familiar to a lot of people who filled in these forms before. Given that the grant is for a small amount of money, we've tried to do our best to make it as easy and short as possible, without losing things that we think are important, which are things like, have you got a decent needs assessment, and have you understood some of the risks that would be involved in implementing a project like this? So what I'll do briefly is just take you through the different sections of the form, and then we've got plenty of time for any questions or any comments that people have got. So to start with, we ask for summary details of your organisation and the partner organisation that you will be working with. We'll ask for bank details, which will be important if we're going to pay any money into your account. And on the cover, we just want to see the total amount of money that you're requesting for this application. There's an eligibility checklist just to see what the lead organisation in Wales is, and what the African-based organisation is, what sort of organisations they are. Again, if you struggle and don't think that you're on there, then give us a shout and I can let you know if there's a problem with your eligibility. Then we will ask about the partnership, and this grant is particularly about supporting partnerships. So we would ask you, you've got 50 to 200 words just to talk briefly about the aim of your partnership. Tell us what organisations are involved, although you've already written down what organisations are involved, but a bit about how long you've been working together and what sort of activities you've been implementing together and what sort of experience you have there. Then we've got a section on needs assessment, and this is just to be clear about what is the need for this money, what is the problem that you're trying to address. For example, it could be that you are having trouble in having regular partnership meetings with the partner organisation that you're working with because they don't have a decent computer or they don't have decent internet access. It could be that you're running a project in the field somewhere in Africa and that it's not very effective because the project officers who are dispersed right around the countryside are not able to get information in very easily to the project manager. And it could be that having some of these technologies could help with that. We just need you to say, what the issue is, what's going on, and what problem is that you're trying to address with this grant. Then we have a section on a description, just very simply, what are you going to do with the money if you get the grant? So what we want to see there is some pretty specific information. So instead of saying something like, we will upskill the team in Namibia, we would like you to say that we will send 4 members of the team on 2-day training course in order to increase their skills in this or that. So if you're talking about groups of people, really important and helpful to know how many people you're talking about, how many people are involved. If you're talking about training or development, be good to know exactly what level of training, how much development you expect people to undergo with this. And again, we'd want to know numbers of telephones or computers, or if you're wanting to use this grant in order to, say, develop your website to get more interaction, then we'd like to know what your level of interaction is at the moment and what level of interaction that you're looking for in the future. So that brings us on a little bit to the question of how will you tell if it's been successful? If you've been able to give us some numbers which indicate how many people will be involved or what level of success you've got, then again, the question here is tell us the difference that the funding will be made to your work. Be as specific as possible, and how will you know if it's been successful? So give us some thoughts around what success looks like for you. Does it mean that more people are able to come along to your meetings? Does it mean that as a result of this intervention, that instead of 50% of meeting participants feeling that it was satisfactory, that actually 90% of participants felt that it was satisfactory? So we'd like to know, how are you going to measure how this is going to work? We've got a brief section on sustainability and risks. And there are, of course, several meanings of the word sustainability. In this, we're going for very, very simple. We're not talking about sustainable development. You don't have to consider the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and all of its goals, or the UN Sustainable Development Goals. What we're thinking of is we just want to be reassured that we are not going to give you a grant to buy a piece of equipment that is useful for 3 months but becomes useless because either you don't have the money in order to connect that computer to the internet, or you buy a license for a particularly exciting piece of software, but in the second year you no longer have the money to pay for that license, so it becomes useless. Or, for example, if you spend a lot of money on training a key member of staff and that key member of staff leaves it within 3 months. So what we'd like you to do is think about what the potential issues are. How could this go wrong and lead to a stranded asset, or lead to something which becomes useless after a few months, and tell us how you're going to avoid that situation. For example, if you do train a key member of staff very much in depth, then maybe you could think about that member of staff coming back and training 5 other people in the organization to make sure that those skills are continuing and are continuing to help you once the grant is over. Then we've got a little section on risks. We'd like you to think about what the risks are of implementing a piece of work like this. We, of course, this is a standard thing in all application forms to think about what the risks could be. There are lots of risks potentially in implementation of a project. If a key member of the team goes off sick, for example, then that could be a risk to implementation. When you're thinking about digital projects, then I think we would also expect you to think about things like data protection. If you're getting a computer and a system to store people's names and addresses and information about them, then have you considered how you're going to make sure that that information is kept safe? We'd also like to consider risks around inclusion. If you're going to put a piece of technology in again to a community, then how do you make sure that that piece of technology doesn't just be used by one section of the community there? There's often, again, issues with computer projects in schools, for example, where you'll find that they benefit boys more than girls, and less girls are particularly being invited in to experience the benefits and gain those skills. So think about some of the risks that are involved, not just in money being nicked or computers being nicked, but also, are you going to get the sort of outcomes that you'd like to see from this? Then we've got a budget section. We have tried to keep this quite simple. Again, you've just got a section there to talk about what it is that you're going to do. Are these things activities, or are they operational support costs? Think about the total costs of those, and it may be that you're looking for part funding for a project, for a piece of equipment or a particular piece of work that you want to do, that you've got some money that you can put into it, or you've got a donor who can put some more money into it. So if you do have some match funding, then we'd like you to take that into account, and that would again help us to see that this offers particular value for money, but that is in no way required. If you don't have any match funding, then don't worry about it. You can certainly just say that this is the amount that you're requesting from us in order to do that. And then finally, I think it's finally, no, not quite finally, contact details. That should be pretty self-explanatory. Just pop in contact details for yourselves. And then we ask for some extra information. So we've got here partnership agreement. We would expect you and your African partner, or maybe, sorry, there are people joining here from Africa, so we would expect you and your Welsh partner to have a partnership agreement in place to make sure that your organisations are working effectively together. We would want a copy of the constitution of the lead applicant, so that would be the organisation which is based in Wales. We will have to ask you to agree that we can store your details. So there's a little section there just to fill in from the General Data Protection Regulations Act. We ask you to confirm that you don't have any conflicts of interest, and we ask you don't have to sign up to the Hub Cymru Africa mailing list, but if you'd like to, then there's a section there for you to also fill in. So the deadline is the 20th of June. I think that's correct, yes. So the deadline is noon on Monday, the 20th of June. If you fill in this application form and then send a copy of that along with a copy of your constitution to grants@hubcymruafrica.org.uk, then we will deal with them from there. Right, I think that is it for my introduction presentation about what the grant is all about, how to fill in the form. So do we have any questions or comments? I haven't looked in chat.
So there's one question in chat, Julian, that is saying, can you please speak more on fair trade criteria repurchasing of computer equipment that he mentioned briefly? Yes.
Well, I mean, the thing is that there's very little in the way of fair trade computer equipment. It is possible to get fair trade mobile phones, which are called fair phones, which are very effective, but they are quite expensive, and they're probably a lot more expensive than if you were to get reasonably cheap equipment. I think if you were able to run a project which used some of that technology and made a particular thing of it, then I think we would look very favorably on that. But I don't think that we would rule out applications that just had to make use of regular technology. But what we would like to see again is, have you considered local markets, and have you considered where to buy those things? And I think we would look again more positively on applications which demonstrated that they were able to buy these things locally, that's helping the economy of the place where the project is happening, rather than buying things in Wales and shipping them over, although again that's not always possible. And certainly if you're able to make use of effective and quality second-hand equipment, then we would look quite favorably on that, although we would have concerns about using outdated or dodgy second-hand equipment, which would only would only add to the problems of computer waste currently being dumped on Africa. So it's a bit of a complicated world, and I don't think there is a way of saying, this is exactly the solution that we would demand. But what we would really like to see is that you've had to think about that, and that you have some ideas of how to do things as ethically as possible. So, do we have any more questions? Would anybody like to raise their hands or put anything in the chat? Oof, Carol, wonderful. Carol, do please come off mute. There's a few of us, we can have a chat.
Okay, so one of my questions, you spoke a bit about sustainability. And, I know one of the issues that we face is the inability to meet as often as we need to for projects because of that, that cost of meeting equipment, etc. The thing is that the sustainability issue is kind of hard to address, because then you're basically asking me, because when the grant runs out, you're right, that problem is going to come up again. But it does allow us to do a really important piece of work while trying to maybe find other solutions, but we don't know what those solutions are yet.
Right.
It's a hard one, because you want to have the meetings and you want to do the work, but you can't see the end at the beginning. And
do you think that the ongoing problem is it simply, well, nothing is very simple. Is it mainly about data costs in the future that would stop these things being as useful in a year's time as they would be 3 months into the timeline?
It's sort of, the project is on building sustainable livelihood. So what you would hope is that as you meet and you have the project grows, that income will be generated so that you don't have that issue in the long term, but there's no guarantee.
Yep. I think if you have a coherent plan, which is not too far-fetched, then I think we would be quite happy for you to take a risk, because you could say that about pretty much any project, that there's no guarantee that things will work out in the longer term. You can do your best. You can consider what the risks are. You can consider contingencies. You can consider what other people have done that has worked in order to minimize the risk of it all falling apart. But I think particularly that if you can come and say, we think bringing in this equipment or spending this money or doing this training will have a long-term benefit, and we have got good reason to suppose that we will be able to raise this money for these running costs over the next year using this technology or this project, then I think we would be happy to accept that as having a decent go. I don't think we would say, you need to have the money in the bank account in order to make use of it. If you're giving it a go and you've got a decent plan, then we'd be very happy with that.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Does anybody else have any thoughts around that point? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about what I've just said, or anything else related to the grant?
Sorry, Julian, how many grants are you expecting to award?
So we have there's £10,000 in the pot. So we would expect to award between 10 and 20. I am looking at the overall project budget at the moment, and we are hoping to reallocate some of the other spend in the money that the Hub Cymru Africa has been granted into that pot. But I haven't had that conversation, and I haven't had agreement to do that yet. But it's not likely to be more than £3,000 maybe. But it may be that we can bump up the money that's in that pot by not spending money that we had allocated for other things. And don't apologise, Carol, nobody else is asking questions, so anything you...
Thanks, Julie.
So fine.
I have a question, Julian, about timing. Sorry if you've already said this, but I guess, what is your deadline, and then what's your turnaround for letting people know and that kind of stuff?
So the deadline is the 20th of June. We would expect to let people know by the end of June. So people could be starting projects in July, and then we need, and I say project, even though some of these things may be fairly small acquisitions, but I say project, I suppose, because we also ask you to come up with some ways that this is working, and you will need to be able to demonstrate that, yeah, we did this in September, and we have we've done these meetings and they went really well, or this work has improved because of this intervention. But we ask people to complete that assessment by December and report to us then in January.
That's a lovely segue into my next question, Julian, which was about the reporting, I guess. So in December, you're expecting a report. What will that look like? What will What will people need to think about?
So the report will be again quite brief. It will be just to explain what it is that you spent the money on. So if you've spent the money on the hardware, or you spent it on licenses or training, so just to say what you've spent the money on, what happened as you were implementing this, and what assessment you're able to make of the results that you thought that you could come up with through doing the project. So we haven't done the reporting form yet, as it was a miracle we got the application form done on time, but the reporting form, like the application form, will be quite brief. We're intending for it to be reasonably light touch compared to the things you have to do for larger grants. And Carol, you've raised your hand. You're good value for money, Carol.
Kath made me think of a question. And one of the things you said earlier is, especially for some equipment, that supporting the local economy and buying locally. And that gets me thinking about receipts and transferring money. And do you want to speak a little bit about that? Because sometimes, the receipt is going to be in a foreign currency. It's not going to be in sterling. So just what your thoughts are on that practical element, please.
Yep. So for the practical element of it, we would expect people to retain receipts and paperwork. We understand that a lot of them would be in a foreign currency, but just to retain what you can. In terms of, if you are buying equipment for several £100s, then we would expect you to keep a receipt for that. If you're paying somebody for training, then we would expect for you to keep a receipt for that. We do not want you to send us all the paperwork. We would just be looking for a simple final report of what you'd spent as part of the project. We do need you to keep that paperwork just in case we are audited. And so we require anybody who gets a grant to retain that paperwork for 7 years. But that is just in case somebody comes to us and says, we need you to demonstrate that you have, that all of this money has been spent correctly. So we don't expect you to produce lots and lots of paperwork at the end of the grant, but we need you just to promise that you've still got it in case any sort of investigation has to happen.
Thank you, Julian.
No problem. Any more thoughts or questions? It's all very quiet today, isn't it?
I have a question, Corinne Mills from Tools for Self-Reliance.
Brilliant.
You mentioned earlier that the grant is not to be given to charities with large amounts of money. What sort of reserves would preclude a charity from getting the grant?
Oh, now you're asking. Now you're asking. It's not really about reserves. I think it's. I just wanted to give an indication, really, that we're not going to be giving this money to United Purpose or Oxfam or Christian Aid. It's unlikely to affect any of the smaller Welsh-based organisations. To be honest, we haven't sat down and worked out exactly what that means, but it's really just to avoid a large organisation with lots and lots of money coming forward and writing an excellent bid and scooping out £1,000 that really could be far better used by a much smaller organisation.
So you're talking mega rather than large.
Yeah, I think I'm talking United Purpose, yeah, other than Bees for Development, say.
Okay.
So an email, a message. Oh, brilliant! They're all coming in now. People are getting warmed up. So kindly clarify who writes the application, the one in Africa or Wales. The writing of the application doesn't matter, but the important thing is that the application has to be submitted by a Welsh-based organisation, and they have to be the ones who handle the grant. And then Nitin, can Julian highlight these small grants eligible for Wales organisations that have already applied before? Yeah, absolutely. If you've applied before and been granted, then you're quite eligible to apply again and get more money.
But also you don't have to have had a grant previously to be able to apply for this grant.
Yes, that's correct.
I think we can wrap up early if nobody has any other questions. Thank you, Carol. Are you happy with that, Julian?
Yes, that's great.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to stop
Wonderful.
recording.
Thank you, everybody.